My phone rang during my wife's funeral prayer. Claire was lying in her casket 10 feet away, and her boss was calling me. Hank, Anna Mitchell whispered urgently, Claire is still safe. Come to my office right now. Don't tell your kids. Still safe? My wife was dead. I was staring at her body. What are you talking about? Not over the phone. Come alone. She hung up. Around me, mourners bowed their heads. My three children stood beside the casket, looking appropriately grief-stricken. Edward adjusted his new $15,000 Rolex. Mary clutched her $2,000 designer bag. George checked his phone every 30 seconds. Strange behavior for people who'd been asking to borrow money just weeks ago. Anna Mitchell had been Claire's best friend for 20 years. She was also one of the sharpest financial investigators in the state. If she was calling me during my wife's funeral, with talk of safety and secrets, she'd discovered something that could destroy my family. I reached into my jacket and touched my father's old hammer, the same one I'd carried through 50 years of building Johnson & Sons hardware from nothing into 12 profitable stores. 3 generations of honest work. But as I watched my children's faces during their mother's funeral, I realized honest work might be exactly what was under attack. Whatever Claire had discovered before her death, Anna was about to tell me something that would change everything I thought I knew about the people I'd raised. And if you're listening to this story, you might want to pay attention. Because what happened next could save you from the worst betrayal of your life, the kind that comes from inside your own family, the kind that starts at a funeral and ends in a courtroom. My name is Henry Johnson. I'm 71 years old. I'd built Johnson & Sons from nothing. 50 years ago, I started with one small hardware store and my father's worn hammer. The same hammer that had built barns across 3 counties. The same hammer I carried in my pocket every day, its wooden handle smooth from decades of work. By 5 every morning, I was checking inventory. My hands always smelled like pine lumber and cold steel. That's the scent of honest work. Something I learned from my father, something I taught my children, or thought I did. Claire and I had been married 45 years. She handled the books, I handled the business. Together we grew Johnson & Sons into 12 locations across the state. We employed 63 people, most of them for over a decade. Fair wages, good benefits, respect for hard work. Claire was meticulous with numbers. Every penny accounted for, every receipt filed. She'd catch a missing dollar faster than I could spot a bent nail. That's what made her so good at her day job with Anna's financial firm. 30 years of experience tracking money flows for small businesses like ours. Our 3 children grew up in those stores. Edward, the eldest, got his MBA and kept talking about modernization plans. George worked as our in-house accountant, quiet, detail-oriented, exactly what we needed. Mary helped with marketing and customer relations before marrying Stephen Phillips and moving across town. I thought I was leaving them a legacy. 12 successful stores, debt-free buildings, loyal customers who trusted the Johnson name, a foundation their children could build on. The morning Claire died, she'd been working late on quarterly reports. Heart attack, the doctors said, quick and painless. At 66, she'd seemed healthy as ever. We'd planned to retire together in 2 years, maybe travel to see the grandchildren more often. Now I stood in Anna's office, still wearing my funeral suit, still carrying my father's hammer like a talisman. Anna closed the door behind me and turned the lock. Hank, sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to hurt. She opened a manila folder on her desk. Inside were bank statements, email printouts, and photographs I didn't recognize. Claire found something 3 weeks ago. She came to me because she didn't know what to do. Anna's hands trembled slightly. Your children have been planning to take over your company. Not inherit it, Hank. Take it. The smell of Anna's coffee mixed with the lingering scent of lilies on my suit. Everything felt too bright, too sharp. What do you mean, take it? Anna slid the first document across her desk. Edward has been meeting with Pinnacle Hardware. They want to buy Johnson & Sons, all 12 locations. Pinnacle was our biggest competitor. They'd been trying to undercut us for years with cheap imported tools and part-time staff. Everything we stood against. Edward can't sell anything. The company's in my name. That's where George comes in. Anna showed me bank statements with my signature on them, except I'd never signed those checks. Your son has been transferring money into his personal accounts. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. The numbers blurred together. 50,000 for marketing expenses, 80,000 for equipment repairs, another 150,000 for employee bonuses that no employee had ever received. And Mary? She's been spreading rumors in the community, telling people you're getting forgetful, telling them the business is struggling, setting up the story they need. The hammer felt heavy in my pocket. 3 generations of honest work, and my own children were tearing it down for quick money. Claire figured it out when she cross-referenced the company accounts with your personal banking. The patterns were wrong, money moving in directions it shouldn't. Anna handed me the last document, a draft petition for emergency conservatorship. Edward's name at the bottom as petitioner. They're going to claim you're mentally incompetent, Hank. They've already lined up a doctor who'll say you can't manage your affairs. Once they get guardianship, they can sell everything. My throat felt dry. How much time do I have? Claire thought maybe 6 weeks before they made their move. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. And Claire was dead. The woman who'd discovered their betrayal, who could have testified about the forged signatures and missing money. Anna must have seen the question in my eyes. The doctors ran every test, Hank. It was a heart attack. Natural causes, but the stress of what she'd learned. Anna's voice trailed off. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 71 years. What did you mean on the phone? That Claire was still safe? Anna's smile was thin but determined, because she made copies of everything before she died, and she made me promise to help you if anything happened to her. Anna opened her desk drawer and pulled out a thumb drive. Everything's on here. Every forged signature, every transferred dollar, every email between your children and Pinnacle Hardware. The weight of possibility settled on my shoulders. Evidence, documentation, proof. But there's something else, Hank. Something Claire was very specific about. Anna met my eyes. She said if anything happened to her, you needed to be smarter than them. You needed to let them think they were winning, right up until the moment they lost everything. Anna Mitchell knew something about the quiet war that was about to begin, and whatever Claire had planned before she died, it was still winnable. 3 days after the funeral, I sat across from Edward in the conference room of our main store. The smell of sawdust and motor oil drifted in from the warehouse, scents that had comforted me for 50 years. Today they felt like memories of something already lost. Dad, I know this is hard to talk about so soon after Mom's death, Edward said, his voice careful and measured, but we need to discuss the future of the company. I let my hands tremble slightly as I reached for my coffee cup. Anna had been very clear about this part. Let them see what they wanted to see. I don't know, Edward. Everything feels so complicated without your mother. George sat next to Edward, avoiding eye contact. His laptop was open to spreadsheets I knew were filled with lies. Mary perched on the edge of her chair, checking her phone every few minutes. That's exactly what we're worried about, Mary said. Dad, you've been carrying so much responsibility for so long. Maybe it's time to let us help more. Help? The word felt bitter. Edward leaned forward. We've been talking, and we think you should consider stepping back from day-to-day operations, just temporarily, while you're grieving. I blinked slowly, as if trying to process what he was saying. Step back? Let us handle the financial side, George said quietly. You've earned the right to rest. The irony was perfect. George, who'd been stealing from us for months, offering to handle our finances. You all know the business better than anyone. I let my voice crack slightly. Your mother always handled the numbers anyway. Something shifted in Edward's expression. Relief, maybe. Or satisfaction. We just want to take care of you, Dad, Mary said, but her eyes were already calculating. You've sacrificed enough. I noticed things I'd missed before. Mary's designer handbag, easily $2,000. George's new car keys on the table with a BMW logo. Edward's watch wasn't the only upgrade he'd made. They'd been spending their theft already. Money that should have gone to employee bonuses, to store improvements, to the retirement fund Claire and I had carefully built. There's just so much I don't understand, I said, letting confusion creep into my voice. The insurance, the legal things, the bank accounts. Don't worry about any of that, Edward said quickly. We'll handle everything. You just focus on taking care of yourself. Focus on taking care of myself, while they focused on taking everything else. Maybe you're right, I said slowly. I feel so lost without your mother's guidance. George's laptop chimed with a new email. He glanced at it and his face went pale. Mary leaned over to look at the screen. What is it? Edward asked. Nothing urgent, George said, closing the laptop quickly, but I caught the reflection in the window behind him. The email header had mentioned Pinnacle Hardware. They were moving faster than Anna had expected. Claire's death had accelerated their timeline. Well, I said, standing up slowly and gripping the table for support, I suppose you all know what's best. Your mother always said you were smart children. Smart enough to betray everything we'd built. Smart enough to forge my signature. Smart enough to plan the theft of 50 years of honest work. But perhaps not quite smart enough to realize that their mother had discovered their plan before she died. I walked toward the door, then paused as if remembering something. Oh, Edward? That's a beautiful watch. Very expensive looking. Edward's hand moved reflexively to cover the Rolex. It was a gift. From whom? A pause. From Jennifer. For our anniversary. Jennifer, his wife, who worked part-time at a daycare center, buying $15,000 watches on a daycare salary. How thoughtful of her, I said. Your mother would have loved to see you all doing so well. As I left the conference room, I heard them start whispering immediately. Good. Let them think their confused, grieving father hadn't noticed anything important. Anna Mitchell was right about the quiet war that was starting, and my children had just shown me exactly how they planned to win it. Edward called a family dinner for the following Sunday. To discuss Dad's transition, he told George and Mary. They didn't know I'd overheard the phone calls. They didn't know about the recording app Anna had helped me install. I arrived at Edward's house carrying a covered dish and wearing my most confused expression. Inside, the dining room table was set with the good china, the kind you use when you're celebrating something important. Dad, you look tired, Mary said as I sat down. Are you sleeping? I let my hands shake as I reached for the water glass. Not really. Keep waking up expecting your mother to be there. The sympathy on their faces almost looked genuine. That's part of why we wanted to talk tonight, Edward said. We've been thinking about how to make things easier for you. Stephen, Mary's husband, nodded along. You've been under so much stress, Mr. Johnson. It shows. I played my part perfectly. Slow responses, occasional confusion about details, moments where I seemed to lose track of the conversation. Everything they needed to see to justify what came next. We think, George said carefully, it might be time to simplify your responsibilities. Let us take over the day-to-day decisions. What kind of decisions? Edward exchanged a look with Mary. Financial decisions mainly, managing the stores, handling the bank accounts, dealing with suppliers. Everything that mattered, everything that generated money. I don't know, I said slowly. Your mother always said I should keep control of the business. But Mom's not here anymore, Mary said gently. And you're struggling, Dad. We can all see it. I let tears form in my eyes. Not hard to do, thinking about Claire's real death and my children's betrayal. Maybe you're right. I just feel so overwhelmed. George pulled out a thick folder of papers. We've had some documents prepared. Nothing complicated. Just power of attorney forms so we can help with the business while you're grieving. Power of attorney, and the legal key to everything. You want me to sign these tonight? Only if you're comfortable, Edward said. But sooner would be better. There are some time-sensitive decisions coming up. Time-sensitive like their deal with Pinnacle Hardware. Time-sensitive like the money George was still transferring out of company accounts. I picked up the first document and held it close to my face, squinting. The print is so small, I can't really... Here, let me summarize, Mary said, moving closer. It just gives us authority to handle business transactions when you're not available. And pay bills, George added, and make banking decisions, and sell the company, and transfer assets, and destroy 50 years of work. I suppose that makes sense, I said. But do I need a lawyer to look at these first? Dad, we are looking out for your interests, Edward said firmly. Stephen works in finance. George does our books. Mary understands the business side. You can trust us. Trust them. The three people who'd been systematically stealing from me while their mother was alive, who were now using her death as cover for the final theft. Well, I said, reaching for a pen with trembling fingers, if you think it's best. Edward's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression changed. What? Mary asked. Someone from Pinnacle Hardware wants to meet this week, about opportunities for collaboration. I kept my face blank, but inside pieces were clicking together. The meeting Claire had discovered, the emails on George's laptop, the reason they needed legal control so quickly. Pinnacle? I said, as if trying to remember. Aren't they our competitors? Sometimes competitors become partners, Dad, George said. It's just business. Just business. 50 years of building customer relationships, employing local families, supporting the community, just business. I signed the first document with a shaky hand, then the second. By the time I finished the stack, Edward, George, and Mary had legal authority to act in my name for almost everything related to Johnson & Sons. There, Mary said, gathering the papers. Now you can focus on healing instead of worrying about business details. As I drove home that night, I called Anna from the car. It's done, I said. They have power of attorney. Good. How do you feel about the performance? Like I just handed my children a loaded gun. I paused at a red light. Anna, what if Claire's plan doesn't work? Then we go to plan B. What's plan B? We make sure they dig their own grave so deep that no judge in the country would let them crawl out. The light turned green. Behind me, I could see Edward's house in my rearview mirror, still blazing with lights. They were probably celebrating already, but Anna Mitchell knew something about justice that my children had forgotten. Sometimes the deepest graves are the ones you dig for yourself. Anna's office felt like a war room. Financial documents covered every surface. 2 laptops displayed bank records and email threads. A timeline stretched across one entire wall, tracking money flows and phone calls going back 6 months. Claire was brilliant, Anna said, pointing to the timeline. She didn't just discover their plan, she documented it. I stood before the evidence of my children's betrayal, still wearing the mask of confused grief I'd perfected over the past week. But here, with Anna, I could let the mask slip. Show me everything. Anna pulled out the first batch of bank statements. George has been transferring money in patterns. Small amounts at first, then larger, but always just under the reporting thresholds that would trigger automatic reviews. The numbers told a story of careful, methodical theft. 50,000 in January labeled marketing consultation, 80,000 in February for equipment maintenance that never happened, 150,000 in March for employee bonuses that no employee had received. Total so far? I asked. $280,000. But that's just what Claire found. I think there's more. Anna opened her laptop to reveal George's email account. Claire had legitimate access to company communications for bookkeeping. She copied everything before she died. Email after email between George and someone at First National Bank about business line of credit secured by real estate. Real estate that included 2 of our store properties. He's been using the stores as collateral, I realized, for a $500,000 credit line. Money he's been moving into personal investment accounts. My father's hammer felt heavier in my pocket. George wasn't just stealing cash flow. He was leveraging the physical foundation of everything we'd built. Anna clicked to another email thread. And here's Edward's communication with Pinnacle Hardware. The subject line read, Johnson & Sons Acquisition Timeline, Confidential. I read over Anna's shoulder. Edward discussing elderly father's declining capacity. Details about family concerns regarding business management. Timelines for resolution of ownership questions. They've been planning this for months, I said. More than that. Anna opened another folder. Mary's been working social media. Look at these Facebook posts. Screenshots of Mary's carefully crafted messages to local community groups. Worried about dad since mom passed. Family business struggles when management gets overwhelmed. Grateful for friends who understand difficult transitions. Building narrative. Creating public perception of my incompetence before anyone even questioned it. Brilliant and disgusting, I muttered. There's more. Anna pulled out a medical folder. They've already consulted with Dr. Hamilton about age-related cognitive decline. He's prepared to testify about your deteriorating mental state based on conversations with your children. Dr. Hamilton, who hadn't examined me in 3 years, who was willing to diagnose dementia based on my children's reports. So, what's our counter strategy? Anna smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Claire called it the bear trap. We let them think they're winning, right up until they step into the snare. She turned to a fresh whiteboard. Phase 1, intelligence gathering. We know their plan, they don't know we know. We use that advantage to collect evidence of every crime they're committing. Phase 2, provocation. We create pressure that forces them to accelerate their timeline and make mistakes. Phase 3, documentation. We record them committing fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse in real time. Phase 4, legal action. We present everything to law enforcement and family court simultaneously. The strategy was elegant. Instead of confronting them directly, we'd create conditions where they'd incriminate themselves beyond any possibility of defense. What kind of pressure? Anna pointed to a stack of real estate documents. Tomorrow, you're going to call me from your home phone and ask about selling the house and moving to Florida. You're going to make sure George overhears the conversation. Why? Because if they think you're liquidating assets and leaving the state, they'll panic. They'll accelerate their timeline and start making the kind of mistakes that leave evidence trails. I understood. Force them to move fast and sloppy instead of slow and careful. Exactly. Claire figured out that their greatest strength, patience and planning, could become their greatest weakness if we controlled the timeline instead of them. Anna handed me a small device about the size of a USB drive. Recording equipment. Anna activated voice recording on your phone, but this is backup. Keep it in your pocket during all family interactions. Is this legal? In this state, single-party consent for recording. As long as you're part of the conversation, you can record it legally. And if they find out? They won't. They're so convinced you're declining that they won't imagine you're capable of this level of strategic thinking. Anna was right. My greatest advantage was their underestimation. They saw a confused, grieving widower. They missed the man who'd built a successful business through 50 years of careful planning and patient execution. There's one more thing, Anna said quietly. We need to talk about Claire. My chest tightened. What about her? She left a video message, for after you'd heard everything. Anna turned her laptop screen toward me. There was Claire, sitting in this same office, looking tired but determined. Hello, darling, she said from beyond the grave. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone and Anna has told you about our children. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, warm but firm, the voice that had guided our business decisions for 45 years. I know you're hurt. I know you're angry. But Hank, I need you to be smarter than them. Don't let rage make you sloppy. Use the law. Use evidence. Make them convict themselves. She leaned closer to the camera. They think love makes us weak. Show them that love makes us methodical. The video ended. I sat in silence, feeling the weight of her final strategy settling over me like a mantle of responsibility. Tomorrow we start phase 2, Anna said. Are you ready for this war, Hank? I pulled out my father's hammer and set it on Anna's desk. 3 generations of honest work. 3 generations of building something that mattered. Anna Mitchell, my children have no idea what they've awakened. Tuesday morning, I called Anna from my kitchen phone at exactly 9 o'clock. George was in the next room, supposedly working on company books. I'd made sure he could hear every word. Anna, I've been thinking about what we discussed, I said loudly enough to Carrie. About selling the house and moving somewhere warmer. Oh? Anna's voice carried perfectly through the phone's speaker. Have you made a decision? I think Florida makes sense. Claire always wanted to retire there. Maybe it's time. Through the doorway, I could see George's fingers freeze over his laptop keyboard. That's a big step, Hank. Are you sure you want to leave everything behind? Everything reminds me of her here. The house, the business, the stores. Maybe starting fresh would be better for my health. George closed his laptop and moved closer to the kitchen doorway. When are you thinking about making this move? Anna asked. Soon, maybe by Christmas. I could sell the house, maybe sell my share of the business to the kids, take the money, and buy a little condo in Tampa. George appeared in the kitchen doorway. Dad, are you thinking about moving? I covered the phone's mouthpiece. Oh, George, I didn't see you there. I uncovered the phone. Anna, let me call you back. George is here. I hung up and turned to my son. I was just exploring options. Moving to Florida? Dad, that's a huge decision. I know, but this house feels so empty without your mother, and managing the business is getting overwhelming. George's mind was clearly racing. What did you mean about selling your share of the business to us? Well, if you're going to be handling everything anyway and I'm moving to another state. I shrugged. Makes sense to formalize the arrangement. Have you talked to Edward and Mary about this? Not yet. I wanted to think it through first, figure out the financial side. George's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at me. Dad, maybe we should call a family meeting tonight to discuss this properly, if you think that's best. After George left, I called Anna back. He took the bait. How long until Edward and Mary know? I give it 10 minutes. I was wrong. It took 7 minutes. Mary called first, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Dad, George says you're thinking about moving to Florida? It's just an idea, sweetheart. But selling the business? Dad, that's not a decision you should make while you're grieving. I'm not making any decisions quickly, just exploring possibilities. Promise me you won't do anything until we can all talk tonight? Of course. Edward called 12 minutes later with the same barely concealed urgency. By afternoon, all 3 children had called at least twice with variations on, don't do anything drastic, and we need to discuss this as a family. Anna had been right. The prospect of me liquidating assets and leaving the state had shattered their careful timeline. That evening, I sat in Edward's living room while my 3 children presented their case for why I shouldn't move to Florida. Dad, you're not thinking clearly, Mary said. Major life decisions shouldn't be made during grief. The business needs stability, Edward added. Selling during a leadership transition would hurt the valuation. George said nothing, but kept checking his phone. Maybe you're right, I said slowly. I just feel so lost without your mother's guidance. That's why you have us, Edward said. We can help with everything. George's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and went pale. What is it? Mary asked. Pinnacle wants to move up their meeting. They want to meet Thursday instead of next week. Why the rush? I asked innocently. Market conditions, Edward said quickly. Sometimes opportunities have short windows. Thursday, 2 days away. Claire had estimated they'd need 6 weeks to implement their plan. Now they were trying to compress it into days. Well, I said, I suppose I can delay any decisions about Florida until after your meeting with Pinnacle. The relief on their faces was unmistakable. After I left Edward's house, I drove to Anna's office. She was still there, even though it was nearly 9 o'clock. They've moved the Pinnacle meeting to Thursday, I reported. Perfect. That gives us less than 48 hours to set the final trap. Anna opened a new file folder. Tomorrow, you're going to have what appears to be a minor medical episode. Nothing serious. Just enough to make them think you're more fragile than they realized. What kind of episode? Dizziness during a meeting. Maybe some confusion about dates or names. The kind of thing that would support Dr. Hamilton's diagnosis of cognitive decline. And George is going to suggest that maybe someone should have medical power of attorney as well as financial power of attorney, just in case. The final piece of their legal framework, the authority to make medical decisions about my care. Once they have both financial and medical power of attorney, and once they're on record discussing the sale of company assets to Pinnacle, they'll have committed enough felonies to put them in prison for years. Anna handed me another small recording device. Thursday's meeting is when they'll say things that can't be unsaid. Make sure you get every word. As I drove home, I thought about the war Claire had designed, not fought with emotions or confrontations, fought with patience, evidence, and the law. Thursday, my children would think they were finally seizing control of everything we'd built. Instead, they'd be handing me the evidence I needed to destroy them. Wednesday afternoon, I staged my medical episode during a meeting with our store managers. Just a moment of dizziness, a brief confusion about which quarter we were discussing. Nothing dramatic. George, who'd insisted on attending the meeting to help Dad with the details, immediately suggested I see a doctor. "Maybe you're pushing yourself too hard," he said with perfect concern in his voice. By evening, George had consulted with Edward and Mary. By Thursday morning, they'd prepared additional power of attorney documents that would give them medical decision-making authority. "Just as a precaution," Mary explained, "in case something happens and we need to act quickly." I signed the papers with shaking hands, playing my role perfectly. Thursday afternoon, I sat in the conference room of Riverside Financial Group. Anna had arranged for Pinnacle Hardware to meet us there, ostensibly for a neutral location. My children arrived first. Edward in his expensive suit, Mary with her designer bag, George checking his phone every 30 seconds. They thought they were minutes away from the biggest payday of their lives. The Pinnacle team included their CEO, Marcus Bell, and their head of acquisitions. They'd done their homework. They knew exactly what Johnson & Sons was worth and exactly how little they wanted to pay for it. "Mr. Johnson," Bell said, shaking my hand, "thank you for agreeing to meet with us." I let my grip be weak, my handshake uncertain. My children thought it might be worthwhile. "We've been admiring your business for years. 12 locations, excellent customer loyalty, prime real estate. You've built something impressive. My father started it. I just tried to keep it going." Edward leaned forward. "Dad's been finding the management responsibilities overwhelming since Mom passed." "Understandable," Bell said smoothly. "That's why we're here, to offer a solution that takes care of your family while preserving the legacy of Johnson & Sons." The recording device in my pocket was capturing every word. "What kind of solution?" I asked. "A full acquisition. We'd purchase all 12 locations, assume all employees, but maintain the Johnson name as a subsidiary brand." "How much?" George asked, barely containing his eagerness. $2.8 million for the complete package. Less than half what the business was actually worth, but my children's faces lit up like they'd won the lottery. "Of course," Bell continued, "we'd need clear authority to negotiate, single point of contact, streamlined decision-making process." "That's not a problem," Edward said quickly. "We have full power of attorney for Dad's affairs." Mary nodded. "Financial and medical. We can make all necessary decisions." There it was, on record, confirming they had legal authority to sell assets worth millions without my informed consent. "Excellent," Bell said. "When can we finalize the paperwork?" "How quickly can you prepare the contracts?" George asked. "We actually brought draft agreements with us today," Bell's acquisition head said, pulling out a thick folder. "Pending your father's approval, of course." All eyes turned to me. I let confusion cloud my expression. This is all very complicated. Are you sure this is the right thing?" "Dad," Edward said gently, "you said yourself that managing everything was becoming too much. This solves that problem." "But your grandfather started this business." "And we're preserving it," Mary said, "under the Johnson name, just with better resources and management." I looked around the table at these people planning to steal my life's work. "I suppose, if you all think it's best." George was already reaching for a pen. "Where do we start the process?" That was when Anna Mitchell walked into the conference room. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, taking a seat at the table. "Anna Mitchell, Riverside Financial. I've been asked to review the financial aspects of this transaction." Bell looked surprised. "I wasn't aware we'd need additional financial oversight." "Standard procedure for any transaction involving elderly clients and power of attorney arrangements," Anna said smoothly. "Just to ensure everything is properly documented." Anna opened her laptop and turned it so the screen faced the table. "I've been reviewing the Johnson & Sons financial records. Very interesting patterns." Edward shifted uncomfortably. "What kind of patterns?" "Well, for instance, there are several large transfers over the past 6 months. money moving from business accounts into personal accounts under various expense categories. George's face went white. For example, Anna continued, $280,000 in transfers that don't match up with any actual business expenses. The room fell silent except for the soft whir of Anna's laptop. Additionally, there appeared to be unauthorized credit lines secured against company property, lines of credit that Mr. Johnson's signature is on, but that he doesn't recall signing. Anna turned her laptop screen toward me. Mr. Johnson, is this your signature on this $500,000 credit agreement? I squinted at the screen, then looked up with perfect confusion. I don't remember signing that. Belle was looking between Anna and my children with growing alarm. Perhaps we should postpone this meeting until these discrepancies are resolved. That won't be necessary, Anna said calmly, because I think we've documented everything we need. She clicked something on her laptop. The recording device in my pocket had been uploading to Anna's computer throughout the entire meeting. Mr. Edward Johnson, Mr. George Johnson, and Mrs. Mary Phillips. You are currently being investigated for elder financial abuse, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Edward shot to his feet. This is ridiculous. Dad has clearly authorized everything. Including the secret meetings with Pinnacle Hardware to sell his company without his knowledge? Anna asked. Including the forged signatures on bank documents? Including the theft of $280,000? George was breathing heavily. Mary was clutching her phone like it might save her. I think, Belle said, standing up quickly, Pinnacle Hardware needs to withdraw from these negotiations immediately. As the Pinnacle team gathered their papers and left, Anna turned to my children. You have the right to remain silent, she said quietly. I'd suggest you use it until you can speak to attorneys. The conference room emptied except for Anna and me. I pulled out my father's hammer and set it on the table. Phase 3 complete, I said. Anna smiled. Phase 4 starts tomorrow morning when we meet with Judge Barnes. 50 years of honest work, and justice would be served not through revenge, but through evidence my children had created themselves. Friday morning, I sat in Judge Patricia Barnes's chambers, wearing my best suit and carrying a folder that contained the end of my children's freedom. Anna sat beside me, along with my attorney, Daniel Hayes. Across the room, Edward, George, and Mary, huddled with their hastily hired lawyers, looking like they'd aged 10 years overnight. This is an emergency hearing regarding the financial abuse of an elderly person, Judge Barnes began. Ms. Mitchell, you've provided some serious allegations. Anna stood and opened her laptop. Your Honor, over the past 6 months, the defendants have systematically stolen money from their father's business accounts, forged his signature on legal documents, and conspired to sell his company without his knowledge or consent. These are very serious charges. What evidence do you have? First, forensic accounting records showing $280,000 in unauthorized transfers. Anna presented the first set of documents. Each transfer was initiated by George Johnson using forged authorization signatures. Judge Barnes examined the documents carefully. Mr. George Johnson, did you make these transfers? George's attorney whispered in his ear. My client invokes his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Second, Anna continued, recordings of the defendants discussing their plan to have their father declared mentally incompetent in order to gain control of his assets. Anna played 30 seconds of audio from the meeting at Edward's house. My children's voices filled the courtroom, discussing power of attorney and my supposed cognitive decline. Third, documentation of secret negotiations with a competing business to sell the plaintiff's company for significantly below market value. Anna presented emails between Edward and Pinnacle Hardware, including detailed discussions of timeline and pricing. Your Honor, Edward's attorney interjected, my client was acting under power of attorney granted by Mr. Johnson himself. That brings us to our fourth piece of evidence, Anna said. Dr. Rachel Cooper's independent psychiatric evaluation of Mr. Johnson conducted yesterday. Dr. Cooper stood from the gallery where she'd been waiting. Your Honor, I performed comprehensive cognitive testing on Mr. Johnson. His mental capacity is completely normal for his age. There are no signs of dementia, cognitive decline, or any condition that would impair his decision-making ability. Judge Barnes looked at my children's legal team. So the power of attorney was granted under false pretenses? Additionally, Anna said, we have recordings from yesterday's meeting where the defendants explicitly stated they had full power of attorney and could make all necessary decisions to sell Mr. Johnson's business assets. Let me be very clear about what I'm hearing, Judge Barnes said. The defendants convinced their father he was mentally declining, obtained power of attorney under those false pretenses, then attempted to sell his business for personal gain? Correct, Your Honor, and they did all of this while their father was grieving the recent death of his wife. The emotional impact hit the courtroom like a physical force. Judge Barnes' expression hardened. Mr. Johnson, she said, addressing me directly, do you understand what has happened here? I stood slowly, feeling the weight of my father's hammer in my jacket pocket. Your Honor, I built Johnson & Sons hardware from nothing over 50 years. I employed 63 people, most of them for over a decade. I thought I was leaving my children a legacy. I paused, letting the gravity settle. Instead, I learned they saw it as something to steal. What are you asking this court to do? I want my business back. I want my stolen money returned. And I want my children to face the consequences of their actions. Judge Barnes turned to the defense attorneys. Do your clients wish to respond to these allegations? More whispered conferences, more Fifth Amendment invocations. Very well, Judge Barnes said. I am issuing the following orders. First, all power of attorney documents signed by Mr. Johnson are hereby revoked, effective immediately. Second, all personal accounts belonging to the defendants are frozen pending investigation of the allegedly stolen funds. Third, any and all business decisions made by the defendants over the past 6 months are nullified. Fourth, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation of elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Edward shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is our father. We were trying to help him. Mr. Johnson, Judge Barnes said, you were trying to help yourselves to his money. There's a difference. George was openly crying now. Mary stared at the floor, her designer handbag clutched in her lap. Bailiff, Judge Barnes said, please escort the defendants to processing. They'll be held pending formal charges. As my 3 children were led away in handcuffs, I felt no satisfaction, only sadness for what they'd chosen to become. Anna gathered her papers. It's over, Hank. No, I said, watching my children disappear through the courtroom doors. Now it begins. Because justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about rebuilding what had been broken. 3 months later, I stood in the main store of Johnson & Sons hardware, breathing in the familiar scent of pine lumber and cold steel, semi-steel, that smell of honest work, the smell of 3 generations of building something that mattered. The criminal trials were still pending, but the civil recovery was complete. Every stolen dollar had been returned. Every forged document had been nullified. The credit lines George had taken out against our properties had been dissolved. Anna walked through the front door carrying coffee and the latest legal update. George's attorney is recommending he plead guilty, she said, handing me the coffee. 2 years in minimum security, full restitution, 10 years probation. And Edward and Mary, still fighting it. Their lawyers think they can minimize their involvement. Anna shook her head. They haven't figured out yet that we recorded everything. I sipped the coffee, thinking about my children sitting in jail cells, still believing they were victims of unfair circumstances. Any regrets? Anna asked. I pulled out my father's hammer and set it on the counter. 60 years of honest work passed down from generation to generation. About protecting what we built? No regrets at all. What about your relationship with them? That was harder to answer. Claire used to say that sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means letting people face the consequences of their choices. Anna nodded. She was a smart woman. The smartest. Even in death, she was still protecting what mattered. I looked around the store. Our employees were back to full hours with restored benefits. The retirement fund was intact. The 12 locations were thriving under honest management again. There's something else, Anna said. I got a call from Stephen, Mary's husband. What did he want? He's filing for divorce. He said he never knew about any of this. He's also asking if there might be a job opening here. Stephen Phillips. The son-in-law who'd sat quietly through family dinners while his wife planned to steal from me, but who'd never participated in the conspiracy itself. What did you tell him? That he should talk to you directly. I considered it. Stephen was a good father to my grandchildren. He'd worked in finance, could be useful in legitimate bookkeeping. Most importantly, he'd been horrified when he learned what Mary had done. Maybe there's room for one family member who still understands the difference between right and wrong. Anna smiled. Claire would approve. What about the grandchildren? Stephen has full custody. Mary's visitation is supervised, pending the outcome of her trial. My grandchildren, 5 kids under the age of 12 who would grow up knowing their parents had tried to steal their grandfather's life's work. That would be a burden they'd carry forever. I want to set up trust funds for all 5 grandchildren, I said. Education not accessible until they're 25. Managed by you. That's generous, considering. They're innocent. They don't deserve to suffer because their parents made evil choices. Anna made notes on her phone. I'll have the trust documents prepared. As Anna left, I walked through the store, checking inventory, greeting employees, touching the tools and materials that represented 50 years of honest business. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Dad? Edward's voice, calling from jail. Can we talk? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 3 generations of disappointment. About what, Edward? I want to apologize. I want to make this right. You want to apologize for stealing from me? For forging my signature? For planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could sell my life's work? Silence on the other end. Edward, I spent 50 years teaching you the difference between right and wrong. If you didn't learn it by now, I can't teach it to you from here. Dad, please. I love you, son. I always will. But I don't trust you, and I never will again. I hung up. An hour later, Mary called with a similar conversation, similar apologies, similar promises to make things right. Same answer from me. George didn't call at all. That evening, I sat in the house Claire and I had shared for 45 years. Too big for one person, full of memories both beautiful and painful. On the kitchen table was a real estate listing Anna had found, a smaller place near the original store, walking distance to work, room for visits from grandchildren, but not so much space that loneliness echoed through empty rooms. Moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant choosing which parts of the past deserved to shape the future. I picked up my father's hammer and carried it to the workshop in the basement. Time to build something new, something worthy of the Johnson name, something my grandchildren could inherit with pride instead of shame. Because that's what justice really means. Not just punishment for the guilty, but protection for the innocent. Not just consequences for those who break trust, but preservation of what's worth trusting. Johnson and Sons. Hardware would survive. Under my name, according to my values, built on the foundation my father had laid 60 years ago. Some legacies are stolen, others are earned. I'd spent 3 months proving the difference. If you know someone who's worried about protecting what they've built from family betrayal, share this story. Sometimes the best defense isn't family loyalty. Sometimes it's evidence and the law. And sometimes the people who truly love you are the ones who help you fight for what you've earned, not the ones who try to take it away.